Today we're going to look at a grammatical error called misplaced modifiers. A misplaced modifier is when a modifier, which is something that modifies a noun or a verb, which would make it either an adjective or an adverb, is far away or in the wrong place in relationship to the verb or noun that it modifies. Let's look at some examples of these to see how this error manifests itself. This first sentence may seem very clear to you. My dog ran away quickly. The verb in this case is ran, and the adverb is quickly. Remember, an adverb says how a verb happened. In this case, it modifies the way that the dog ran. The reason why this is an example of a misplaced modifier is that we want to have the adverb as close as possible to the verb. In this case, the adverb is at the end of the sentence, whereas the verb is in the middle. If we rearrange those words so that we say, my dog quickly ran away, the verb here is ran, and the adverb is quickly. But now we see that the adverb and the verb are right next to each other. The reason why this makes sense to us is because we know that the only thing that an adverb can modify in this sentence is the verb. So there's no question of what this adverb is modifying. Still, for the meaning of the sentence to be most clear, it's best to stick the adverb and the noun or the verb together. Let's look at another example of this. Okay. This sentence says, he barely threw the ball 10 yards. The reason why this is a little bit more complex is because we have this adverb here, barely, and it's sitting next to the verb threw. But if you think about it, it's not that he barely threw, which would mean that he threw the ball 10 yards in a way that was just the minimum requirements of what it would mean to throw something. So our brain is naturally going to connect this adverb and this verb. Whereas what we actually mean is he threw the ball barely 10 yards. Okay. This modifier barely modifies the 10 yards in this case. And so he's throwing the ball. There's no modification of the fact that he's throwing it. The modification is that he threw the ball 10 yards, but barely 10 yards, which means just 10 yards, not 11, not 12. Okay? It barely was 10 yards. Okay? And so the meaning of this sentence implies that through is the verb that gets modified. The meaning of this sentence implies that 10 yards is the entity that gets modified. And since you can't really barely throw something, what you probably mean when you say he barely threw the ball 10 yards is you mean he threw the ball barely 10 yards. Again, you had to pay attention to the location of the modifier because it's going to end up modifying whatever it is closest to. Let's look at how a prepositional phrase can also be a modifier. I watched my sister fall down from the upstairs window. Okay? From the upstairs window is a preposition in this case. And this is a pretty violent sentence that you're describing here. I watched my sister fall down. Where did she fall down? She fell down from the upstairs window. I don't think that would go very well for her. There's a possibility that you don't mean that. You don't mean that your sister fell down from the upstairs window. By the way, if that's what you mean, then this sentence is grammatically correct. But it's possible that you mean this instead. From the upstairs window, I watched my sister fall down. Again, from the upstairs window is the modifier here. It's a preposition and it modifies something. But here it modifies where I watched from. I watched, or from the upstairs window is where I watched, not where my sister fell from. So here, my sister is falling down, and I'm watching her from the upstairs window. Here, I'm watching my sister, and she's falling down from the upstairs window. So the difference between whether it modifies where she falls from or where I watched from is pretty significant in terms of the meaning of the sentence. You could even say, I watched from the upstairs window as my sister fell down, or something like that, if you want to modify it in a different way. Again, what's important is that this modifier is close to either I watched or close to either fall down. And whatever it's closest to is what it's going to modify. Okay, let's think through this sentence on your own, and let's see if you can come up with where the misplaced modifier is in this sentence. The meaning of this sentence changes in a subtle way suddenly. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to modify the adverb, or identify the adverb. Right? It's suddenly. And then you need to ask yourself, what is that adverb modifying? Right, it's changes. How does it change? It changes subtly, or suddenly. And so the next thing to do is to ask yourself, is there a way that you can put the adverb closer to the verb? And the answer would be to say, the meaning of this sentence suddenly changes in a subtle way. Okay, now we've got the same word, suddenly, but it's modifying changes, and they're right next to each other. Okay, so this is a more clear way of phrasing the sentence than this.